I think a lot of people are making those comments, but one thing I'm always interested why no one kind of seems to connect the dots is what that technology is like the biggest factor in our world right now, and it's changing politics, it's changing human nature, and like McLuhan had said, and I was hoping to get into McLuhan with like Geo, but but anyway, he said the medium is the message. Like as we interface with technology and technological mediums, it changes our biases of thinking, right? And it's literally conditioning people to be different. So I mean, when people like the trad movement, when you want things to kind of go back, like I can totally understand that, and but at the same time we're really changing fundamentally, like our whole minds, the structure of the way we see the world, and our whole world is becoming orientated around technology. And so I think that the huge danger, even more than the chaos that it produces. And just as a, I guess as an aside as well, some people think that technology will be this totalitarian force of control, but I think that the trend is clear that technology brings chaos, and it's more destabilizing than anything, and it's going to destabilize the natural world. And I think that the worst, like, we understand the destructive capabilities of technology. In the 60s when they dropped the atomic bombs, there was a big reaction against that because the destruction is obvious. But what we are falling for and failing to recognize is the seductive powers of technology. It's seducing us all into a dream world, and it's happening right now with the internet and Zoom. But as soon as virtual reality environments become a thing, become mainstreamed, which will happen very soon, right? This will happen probably within 5 years, is my estimate. It will really invite us to escape reality altogether and fall into a trance-like dream world. And I mean, I think that I see that more likely as a source of human extinction, that we do suicide by our dream machines, because it's the ultimate wish fulfillment. Like we can go into a world and pretend that we are gods in a world of our own, and we can, and it's just and I think it's a shame. So we'll turn away from life, from nature, from the creator. And of course you could say, although I don't like saying God, just the term God is loaded, I find, but you see what I mean. We turn away from the creation in the natural order. And I think that's more in line of what we're seeing, and it is in line with a whimper, not a bang. Although it will be a bang because no one will be, chaos will ultimately ensue because we'll just from negligence, of our surroundings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't got a lot of chance to bounce that idea off of people. What do y'all think?
That's valid. I think it's pretty valid. Personally, I think that it makes sense. I think the only thing, the only Liberty Party I can see, the only Liberty argument I can see countering that is 3D printers are going to create a world in which I don't need to go out to buy anything. I can just recycle the graphite from my
Yeah,
computer to make a plate, recycle my plate to make
yeah.
an AR-15 stock, and recycle that stock to make a bump stock, and
So
now I'm in business.
it furthers
Like,
compartmentalization and alienation. It's like
yeah,
I'm really
I was hoping.
optimistic. I'm
I,
really optimistic.
oh,
I think
sorry.
it's. I'm sorry. I don't need
Oh
to.
no, I
I
was
No,
cut
no,
just.
you off.
no, no.
I was just going to say that I was hoping those other guys would be here, like the guy and the other guys. So I really wanted to see what they had to say about that too. But anyways, go Jules.
I'm really optimistic about the future. I think, um, a lot of this Kafka-esque stuff doesn't have so much to do with the technology as it does to kind of have to do with maybe some cultural hangups people have.
and it'll
I
be
You're
better
think
when
hella.
those
I
are
think
removed.
I think people I think you see it a lot easier when you look at micro interactions and opposed to like the grand movements and macro stuff. It's just sort of like, how people think about trust, how people think about, you know, oh, here's a new person I've never met before. How am I going to assimilate this person or not assimilate this person into my life? How am I going to think about them? How am I not going to think about them? Oh, I wonder what they think. Oh, like, oh, I have to read all these things to have any kind of idea what this person thinks. And I think it's actually backwards. I think that's how people kind
Wait,
of
are you still talking about the
waded through
apocalypse
it
or what?
before. I don't think we're living through an apocalypse. I do like the phrase. I do like the interpretation of apocalypse as an unveiling.
Well, that's what it means. Yeah.
I think that we are
What
living
about
through the
singularity?
age
What do you
of.
think about that, Jules?
I think that it's a physics term.
Okay.
That I think it's a physics term, and
No,
I
you're right,
think
you're right.
I think it is referencing Moore's law in regard to computers. And no one knows what the future is going to look like, but I have faith in humanity. I think that people hate change. I think Plato hated change. I think Heraclitus disturbed Plato so much. I think Plato hated Heraclitus so much, and that Heraclitus's ideas disturbed Plato so much that he created the theory of forms, right, as his noble lie
What,
to
the
give
Platonic
people
theory
a
of
cope, and
nah,
also to steer
that
them
predates
to
him
what
for sure.
he thought would be the perfect society, the perfect, unchanging, predictable society. And I think it's because he couldn't cope with the nature of uncertainty and chaos and change. And I think Plato is one of philosophy's and history's biggest villains.
Warlock, you said what predated him?
This idea, I mean, with the idea of the world of Platonic forms and all, like he popularized that, but it didn't start with him. Was pervasive throughout that old ancient world.
So you'd say
Places like Persia.
So like the mystery schools that Plato was allegedly a part of, those would be the ones where he would have gotten that understanding. I mean, look, Jules, like, you know me, you know how I like to meditate and like to see all these triangles that Plato was talking about. Like, this is stuff that we are able to perceive.
But Plato would say that those things weren't real, that you wouldn't.
But it's the idea of a triangle, which goes back to
which is more real than, like, no triangle you ever see is a real triangle. The only triangle that would be real exists in the idea plane.
Well, the Kabbalists, and I don't want to misquote, like I wish Andrew Meyer was here, but the Kabbalists would also say, I think, that much like the Advaita Vedanta Hindus would say, that imagination creates life.
It does.
So
if you can imagine like these forms, eventually you get what we have here.
I disagree. Steven Pinker the other day, he tweeted something, he took it down. Nassim Taleb was giving him crap. And I think that Steven Pinker is wrong when he thinks that belief in an afterlife is socially harmful to people. I think he's wrong. I think, however, that he is terrible at providing satisfying explanations for the nature of reality. And I think people cannot cope with the idea of a dead stop, right? Just like a ending of the consciousness continuity. And I think these same people also can't cope with the fact that there are actually other people who think like that.
What do you mean, like when we die, like that's it? There's no afterlife?
Yeah, there's just.
I would
nothing,
say that's extremely
right?
optimistic. That
I
gives
don't.
people life.
I actually
it gives people
hate,
license
no, I don't
to
like
just
that idea.
live with.
I don't like that idea.
Yeah.
I don't
Dude,
like that idea at all.
It lets you off the hook. This modern
nihilism,
nihilistic people think that way, and they just do whatever they want.
I think heaven and hell. I think heaven and hell are places on earth. I think people live in heaven and hell on earth at any given time. Some people live in hell their entire life.
So you're a total materialist, is what you're saying.
Life.
Yeah.
I think there is. So
you don't even believe in ideas.
I don't know what that means when you say that. Ideas, hold on. Ideas are as real. No, ideas, I'll tell you right now. Ideas are as real as the neurons they inhabit.
So that
That's
you're
what I think.
materialist.
I think
Okay.
ideas. I think in terms of matter. Like I think everything matters. I think you matter. And I use that in the terms of like significance and in physical existence. No,
I'm not matter.
this is
I'm
not.
spirit, bro. I'm not matter. I'm
I
spirit.
think spirit is matter, right? I think my spirit is matter, and anything that could be part of my spirit that isn't matter, I don't think exists, or I think is just a mimetic delusion that could be evolutionarily advantageous, right? But I think that I don't like the idea of a dead stop. I think ideas like reincarnation is really nice. I think if there's some kind of Tesla coil where
Well,
you go
I
through a
think that most
recycling,
human beings
I think
throughout
I live
history
on through my
disagree with you.
actions. I think that I live on through my actions. I think that we have ripples through existence.
So do you think that like religion plays any good part in people's life,
I
or
think religion absolutely can play a good
it just shouldn't be
thing in
taken
people's
seriously though?
lives. Why not? I take religion extremely seriously.
Because the
Like I
premise
wouldn't
of
be
it is that
here.
there's a spiritual reality, and then it's not just a material physical world, and that's
I
it. Like
think
that's the whole
if you
premise.
think about it, if you think about a caveman who's using science to make a spear, and then he witnesses a lightning bolt,
Does he use
he would
science? Does
not
he
be
use
able to
science to
use.
make a spear though? Really?
I
Does he
think
really
I
use
think
science to
science
make a spear?
I think that if you don't want to accept a like a really rudimentary definition of science, like I could try to use a different word to satisfy you, but I think science is a process. So yes, I think if you're using a
You could say
process,
reason, perhaps. How about reason?
no, I mean I don't think reason is the same thing. I think that science is a tool you use to navigate uncertainty, and it's a process, right? As in the reason why we keep making better and better and better spears, better and better and better weapons, better and better tools, better and better computers. It's all comes from the same source, right?
I
I
actually
think
would.
that I think that if you have a caveman using science, I'll use that word and you can reject it. But if you see a caveman or you think about back in time, a caveman using science to make a spear, he could witness a lightning bolt and have no way. It'd be impossible for him to use science to explain in physical terms what he just saw. That does not mean it's impossible for science to explain what he saw in physical terms.
Okay.
So,
So
actually, I think it's interesting that McLuhan had said that, technology precedes science. Everyone thinks that science causes technology, but actually, technology causes science. Because with technology, you can create new ways of measuring things. And through that measurement, that sets the bar of what you can see and experiment with. And so, actually, science is just a result of technology, which is the first thing, and which comes from techne, which means craftsmanship in Greek. And so it's like I think it's a totally different function. And science is like quite a relatively new concept. Our ancestors did see a spiritual world. I think it's pretty basic that people have an animism. That means like when they look at the natural world, they feel a kinship with it. They feel there's some thread of life that moves through it and connects it
There's
together with them.
there's that book written by Julian Jaynes talking about Bronze Age people having a bicameral mind, where they thought that the voice of, and I'm not even going to say thought because who the hell knows what exactly is going on there, but according to him, the voice of various gods were speaking through their right hemisphere and ordering them to do certain things. And it's a very different take than like a rational minded caveman constructing certain things with science. At least I kind of see the difference between those two, where there could be certain intuitive things the people started doing, and then later on they started categorizing them and applying much more of a scientific method to it.
But like in the Greeks, which you had mentioned previously, and they were like the first ones to kind of really systematize rationality.
I think while that's well and good, if I'm going to give an honest answer about my version of the apocalypse, that last one I think was just for the United States and maybe parts of Western Europe. I think the rest of the world, the apocalypse there is going to look very different because that was all commenting on the idea of the Western philosophy and culture that's dying. There are parts of the world that are doing fine. There are parts of like China has a 100-year plan, right? It's coming up in about 15 years. They'll be at their mark. Russia liked to work in 25, 50, and 75 and 100-year plans with how they operated in programming, especially when they were trying to subvert other ideologies they determined to be hostile to their own. So if you think about a lot of these faction systems as waiting for other empires to crumble, America's only been around for less than 300 years. We're going to crumble eventually. And when we do topple, we're either going to change into something better and come out Phoenix style, which is you want to be the inherent optimist. That's a great, humanity needs those. But the way that I see it, other places know what they're doing and they're winning. They're winning in the same ways that we're losing, because in all of the individual arguments people have about retaining some level of sovereignty or retaining some level of traditionalism, we see these foreign cultures collating together to attack and annihilate these independent concepts as bigoted, as exclusionary, as whatever, what have you. And that's fine, because ultimately when we fade, just like Istanbul and Constantinople and everything becomes its own spiral there, when we fade, what comes next will be a culture that never developed into this sort of a culture on its own. And I don't think we'll be able to efficiently run it without something boiling over. Because if every place on the planet was meant to look like New York City, every place on the planet would look like New York City. They don't. And I think that for the most part, we're going to watch, just like if you want to take Iran as an example, the way that they looked in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, if you look at the decade picture shots of the level of freedom and the level of fun and then the level of extremity and hardship put upon them by aggressive ideologies, the more fearful the people become, the more willing they are to have someone restrict their liberties. I think without people that are people in the West love freedom, and without that, without people that are willing to say to the faith, to the state, to their own family members, to whoever, without people willing to stand up and say, no, fuck you, I'm going to do it my way. This is my property. Instead, we're going to be replacing this with people who their entire epigenetic memory is set upon their ancestors agreeing, okay, you know what? It's your land. I just work it. And this country is not going to be the beacon of freedom when it's populated by people who don't give a shit about freedom as long as their religious theology or their religious fucking theocracy, or what the society of plutocrats or the technocracy, or however you want to see this Illuminati thing ending. There's a lot of ideologies that are going to win because they don't have little quabbles over things like humanity, and they don't need to give a shit as long as they know they keep the people happy with the dopamine triggers. They keep them happy with thinking that their voice is accurate. You keep them satisfied with allowing themselves to think expansively. You never give them personal responsibility. You never tell them their actions matter and it's all going to end someday, so make every step count. Don't eat that candy bar. You never tell them things like that. You say, go ahead, you only live once. Do you fucking smoke another cigarette, Johnny? And what we end up with is a society that's not only crumbling around the edges, but doesn't want to stand up because it itself is disappointed in itself and doesn't want to think like it's over when it's over.
Do you see
a good doctor has to be very good at social engineering, right? Because you actually want people to take your advice, right? So like if a chronic alcoholic comes to a doctor, if a chronic alcoholic goes to a doctor and you're like, you should just stop drinking, right? You're probably a terrible doctor.
I don't think that he's going to stop drinking because alcoholism isn't a disease. That's bullshit.
You're so Machiavellian, Jules. I think that
people are just disturbed by. So just by me saying what I said and you saying that's so Machiavellian, I think that's the kind of stuff that people should be pessimistic about. Not necessarily the potential for technology, but the potential for thought technologies to be misused, misunderstood, and chronically distrusted to the point of self-destructing and destroying people around you, and then just being blissfully ignorant, right? Like Birdman's The Virtue of Ignorance, right? Like if you think you don't influence people around you, or that's not your responsibility, I think it's just as bad as the person who is intentionally encouraging people to poison themselves with candy and cigarettes and stuff that will destroy them. But the difference is one person is doing it with evil intention and the other person is doing it while patting themselves on the back, going, well, at least I'm not that guy.
I don't think those are the only two options available. I think that if that's sincere, if everything you just said is truly how you feel, then I think perhaps you might get more out of life if you said what you thought instead of saying what you thought someone wanted to hear.
Because I always say what I think. I say
okay. I'm
that,
sorry. It sounds, and I can go back and watch it later, but it sounds like you just said that you want to shape what you're saying, knowing that you have a responsibility not to negatively impact the person listening to what you're saying, and that if I say something to you without catering or editing what I'm saying as I'm saying it, and it impacts you negatively, I'm just as bad as the person that intentionally hurt somebody with my words. So what did you mean if that's not what you said?
Sure. It's the old expression, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I think that people can reveal themselves as much as they want. And I think they're woefully unprepared for living in a society with no secrets. I think they haven't even begun to wrap their head around the fact that they have technology that can look into your head, that they have technology that they're going to be able to project what you're dreaming onto a wall, that you have sensors and radars and all sorts of things. You've got cameras everywhere. You got microphones everywhere, that people are like, this is why Ted Kaczynski said, just blow it up. Because he got down the thought.
It always comes
He
back
got
to
down the
Uncle
thought
Ted.
path. He got down the thought path and went, well, shit, I can't cope with that.
You know,
Get rid of it.
Can I
and I
interject
go,
something?
no, don't get rid of it. Culture needs to evolve in tandem with the technology. And if people want to be Amish, okay, they can have fun, okay? And if people
wait, let's get Info Warlock in here. Info Warlock, you wanted to say something?
To live
first of all,
this...
Drew just earlier made the case that you can't go and be an Amish, that this thing is going to draw you in anyways. And to your point about the technological change that I don't think people are ready for, it can be so comprehensive. Like one example is earlier, and I know this is a hot button issue, and so of course it was brought up many times tonight, the issue of ethnicities and race and nationality and such, and also IQ and different traits. But it's possible that the future there could be like a Gattaca style. Oh no, wait, Gattaca wasn't that. Well, like a genetic, where you set your baby's defaults, right? That can kind of make race irrelevant when you just choose your baby's eye color and IQ number and shit like that. And so it is possible that a lot of, which is why I think that to talk about political, political debates not in that context of this high technological world really miss the point. And it kind of like, it's just old talk. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like it was relevant before, but now we have to use our imaginations now. Like things are very new.
Well, this is why I think that if there are going to be certain people like the Jack Parsonses of the world coming up, we also have such access to information today that we haven't before. It is kind of like a double-edged sword, where all the points you guys are bringing up, I happen to agree with. I think that if things go the way they're going, only thing we can do is try to take care of our families and bring good morals, and they're going to be the people who will pick up the ashes after this whole thing falls down eventually and start over and make a better future. But maybe there is another way that we just haven't seen so far that would come from maybe even conversations we're having right now. Like for the show, I want to get more people in here to exchange
people
ideas
that don't
like this.
think it's going to fall down to bring that future into reality. Because if you have people who are trying to make everything fall down, and then you have a bunch of people who have resigned themselves to it all falling down, like that's the only thing that's the thing that's most likely to happen. You actually need a group of people that go, no, it's not all going to fall down. Because I'm also going to will that future into existence.
Well, this is
which
why
means
this
you also
is good.
have to make yourself vulnerable to that if that's what you want to do.
Info Warlock?
No, I agree that what we're doing right now is a step in the right direction because people are scattered and they feel alienated and they feel isolated, and it's hard to um, come together in any sort of cohesive way, or to, like, I think a lot of people out there you see on Twitter. Pretty active on Twitter, at least since quarantine, and I see you guys. It's how does not everyone feels kind of alienated in their own separate place, and then it's like, and then when you're just by yourself, what can you do, right? So the point I'm making is that by coming together in some capacity, that's at least that's a step towards exactly what you're saying, Jules.
I think there's spiritual benefits to confessional, and that people could get a lot from a compassionate society when confessional is a more public and like frequent thing with everyone, as opposed to like this like chronic isolationism where people manifest a low trust society because they have so little trust of themselves, of others, and so much discomfort and insecurity that they manifest that and then think or tell themselves they don't.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Look, I think if we're going to talk about rebuilding the future, let's be honest that for the most part, confession was created by Jesuits and Rosicrucians to get your secrets. Like we don't need to make mistakes of our past, man. We don't need to make the mistakes.
I think confessional isn't about secrets as much as it is about I think like people go to see psychiatrists all the time. Like that's like all the rage. That's like the big trend. I think these are just like priests with lab coats that people go and they tell their stories to psychiatrists. Sure. They're like, this I had this conversation with this person.
It's not a science at all, psychology.
I ate my candy bar. This person, said a mean thing. This thing hurt my feelings. Oh, I saw this really disturbing picture. And then the psychiatrist goes, and then gives you a narrative. And hopefully you have a good storyteller because your internal narrative is going to be really impacted by your storyteller therapist.
It's going to reflect the distortion of their version.
I think that there are better methods. And I think
you can't underestimate stories, though.
Well, I mean, that's why I went to a shaman.
Doesn't only work in science.
Like, I was not interested in going to it. I tried therapy, Freudian therapy, and then I started reading. I picked up a book at a local library. I picked up The Will to Power, and I picked up 2 Freud psychology books. And I got maybe 4 chapters into one of them. He starts talking about towheads, and I was like, oh, this bigoted piece of shit can get fucked. Opened up the second one, and it's the same shit going halfway through. Only this time he's talking about sexualization in children. And I was like, yo, dude, like, I'm not interested in this.
What's
a towhead? It's an Aryan. It's a blonde person with rosy cheeks. Yeah, he had some stark opinions about them pre-World War II. And like,
I never started thinking about race and any of this stuff until I met Lev. This is like, I used to never care where someone came from. I only cared about where they wanted to go. That's like my number one. Like, I'm like, I don't care where you're from. Where do you want to go?
Well, Jules, my whole thing about race is that I am way more invested in culture than race. I think that there are certain epigenetic things that end up being passed on. To what degree, I have no idea. So my guiding post is if people can integrate into a culture, then it doesn't really matter where they're from if they could keep that same culture going for generation upon generation. And that's, I think, a good middle ground here, because that way we would be able to bring people in who, for example, talking about the Jews again, I'm sorry, but not all the Jews want to live in fucking Israel. They don't live in the fucking desert, even though they did improve that desert to a very high degree from what it was before. But anyway, some want to live in New York. I personally want to live in both New York and have a place out in the countryside with like the trees and raccoons and shit, Like, I want to live that kind of farming lifestyle in the future, and at the same time, I think that there is a capacity for anybody to be able to become guardians of a certain sacred fire that has been passed down, and I don't think the only way of doing that is purely by blood, especially if someone is so invested in it that they're going to devote the time to learning and to integrating, as opposed to people who just sit around all day. Like, I'm sure there are a lot of Jews who sit around all day and don't really give a shit about the Torah. So that's
Yeah,
why.
like, look, yeah, I completely see where you're coming from there. Like the difference between a Jew and an atheistic Zionist, or like, there's a difference, just like a white supremacist and an American nationalist. They're two totally different fucking things. But people draw asinine correlations because it's easier to broad paint with your brush and say X group does this and Y group does this, and that's the way I'll see the world. And it's when I figured out the connection between Western Jerusalem and Putin and Eastern Jerusalem, and I guess just the general Israeli people, and like learned that there was a divide between the two, it was like a bigger mind-blowing moment for me than being able to track back American politics pre-Civil War and be like, okay, so the depiction I got from McGraw-Hill was completely full of shit. I just needed to read a book that was actually written at the time and do my fucking legwork. Like,
negative gossip is a very powerful tool of social control, and a lot of people that use it and implement it are doing it for control.
What do you guys think about psyopses perpetrated by deep state? Yeah, when you're online, you can kind of see the culture of that and the culture of conspiracy and also skepticism. But I think it speaks to, with the internet, there's a glut of information. Like Jules was saying, historically, the problem was there was not enough information, so it was ignorance. Now it's not that way. We're not ignorant, we're confused because there's way too much information. It's not even relevant, right? So then you have groups like you're right. You have groups like the CIA. These are basically secret societies, right? At a time when you can't really keep secrets. So what have they done instead? They said, we'll open up a deluge of misinformation to keep everyone really confused about everything.
That's what negative gossip is most of the time. I don't think that's only what those institutions do. I think that people,
I didn't say it was the only thing.
Knowingly and unknowingly use misinformation all the time, and that it's really up to the individual to love truth, to love beauty, to believe in truth, and to strive for it.
But we're in the post-truth world, man.
I reject that notion.
This is all the ramifications of this technology now.
I think this is all part of the postmodern rabbit hole, which is its own religion. And just like you can talk about Jewish people sitting around and not caring about the Torah, like if you can't talk to like deep postmodernists in a way that gives them light and maybe shows them their contradictions in a way that they desire to get rid of their contradictions, like,
we got to have a postmodernist on here sometime.
You're going to
we will
to roast.
What?
No, we're definitely gonna have I mean, look, we had a professor of gender studies here with delicious tacos and Logo Daedalus.
Fantastic.
And that was amazing. And by the way, Graventus, what is your take on what the psyop is right now and whether we are living in a post-truth world?
I mean, I think it definitely is. I mean, everyone can pretty much pick and choose what they want to believe. We see where, a narrative comes out, a picture or whatever of some event goes viral and everyone immediately makes an opinion. And then the true story comes out, which contradicts, whatever the story was at the time. And people don't care. They already have their bias. They already have what they want to believe. It's prevalent. I would say that, human nature hasn't changed. It's just the tools in which we can sort of show it have. You look at Father Seraphim Rose when he wrote in the 60s, 70s. If I give it to you today, you would think he's talking about today's world. I found a writing from a saint from like the 400s, and I'm like, wow, this is like talking about today. Human nature doesn't change, the tools do. And I think we're seeing that sort of on a larger scale just because of the interconnectivity, which, the tools can definitely be used for a negative and a positive. And I think, it's sort of everyone was talking about this idea of people feeling isolated. I think this idea of this technology being so widespread and people being isolated, we need to capitalize on that and connect with people who, like-minded people who share the same beliefs as we do, and sort of connect with it so we don't have the same isolated feeling all the time. We're like, I'm alone, no one cares. So
that's what I hope we're doing right now. I mean, this is
Even
I
if we
stopped
don't have the
feeling
same
alone
beliefs.
in 2013. Truly. There's someone recommended a weird movie I watched on Netflix. It was kind of David Lynchian. It's something about a car or drive something. I'll pull it up later. But there's a scene when someone's having this nightmare about I'm alone. I'm all alone. Everyone's alone. And I was like, man, I'm so glad I don't feel that way anymore. Right? Home is where the heart is, right? And it's an internal thing. And if you feel like there is no scrim in your ability to speak your mind, it's an extremely liberating feeling. Like you're able to generate so much internal light and warmth from the fact that you're uninhibited that it's like you're part of global consciousness, right? And that's not a mind's eye thing. That is purely mimetic.
Yeah, there's a lot of satisfaction in actual deliberate communication that you can tell is being received. And when you can see that someone it's making an impact and they're actually listening to you, because more often than not, it's two bots yelling at each other. I'm going to give you my pre-programmed response. You're going to give me your pre-programmed response, and we're going to dig in. And it's like, I find it so heartwarming, so heartening. I never get to say heartening. It's always disheartening, but it is so heartening when it's been happening to me a lot lately. Like earlier, I was gonna, I said no to a black pill concept that the fellow with no face was throwing out, and he was the idea is like I've been reaching a lot more people lately than ever before. I had like a nothing following because I've been booted off every platform but Instagram, and now I'm just like hiding there with a private account, right? And I'm hiding out with a private account because I keep getting flagged whenever I try to go public because everything I say is no filter.
You are too woke. You are far too woke for Twitter.
So I've been getting like 150 followers a week the past 3 weeks, more than ever before, unprecedented. And I keep getting things like, you're red pilling the shit out of me. Oh my God, like you woke me up, bro. Like people keep telling me like run for office and shit. And it's blowing my mind because I'm doing the same exact thing I've always been doing. I'm looking at a situation, looking at the headline, right? Reading the actual story and then making an informed opinion about the headline in the caption. And if I think it's bullshit, I'll just talk about something that the headline doesn't even talk about. I'll bring up all the relevant players that it should be talking about. And I'll let it go. And I'll go back to sawing lumber. I'll go back to doing whatever I was doing. I'll come back into it a few hours later. And now it's like where it used to be like 2 or 3 likes and a funny comment. Now it's like fucking 80 of them. It's getting thrown back everywhere and people are arguing with each other in it. And it's like seeing people actually think. It's really making me excited because I'm having people message me like, yo, like, what's this Epstein thing about? And it's like I get to like now I'm seeing people like message
no
me
one
about,
knows about that. Like I have never heard of that.
No. It's not that they don't know about it, but they'll be like they're starting to see correlations between like the same Ivy League professors that are now having their kids get arrested as domestic terrorists are the same people that were hanging out and flying around. And it's like, what the fuck is going on here? I thought like. And it's really starting to get bizarre with people because they're starting to say, wait, there is a massive network of people that all hate the same people. And now they're all doing religion. The most fucked up shit imaginable.
But that's a different religion. Like those lawyers that threw firebombs, they're operating on a religion. They are.
Jihadism.
It's
they're in a holy war right now. They really legitimately are in a war for their souls.
The postmodernism is a religion. And considering how much attention to religion like we've given on this show, I think
what's your religion, Jules?
I am an alpha omega atheist transhumanist agnostic pagan chaos magician.
That's fair. I'm glad you said something because everyone needs some religion. That's the thing about it, you know?
Gotta have faith.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for faith, dude. Like there were points when I did solitary for about 5.5 months, and I lost my shit in there for a minute, and that's like where that's why I got my hands on a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. It was the only religious book on the cart, and I read that shit cover to cover, and I kept doing yoga poses because I only knew like 6 of them, and then doing push-ups and just fucking reading the book and putting it down and being like, wow. And my cousin's name is Arjun. I have a lot of Indians, like dot, not feather, in my family. So like I was like realizing the reason they named him Arjun and the reason they named his brother Ravi. I'm like, why? And it was like, well, that's like, it's mind blowing. You know what I mean? Reading about Krishna like that. It's like, it's fucking, and then I could see the correlations between that Gnostic belief system and other Gnostic belief systems. And I tied back to my own Viking lineage. Like my family got named Napier, no equal, because of our prowess in the battlefield. Before that, we folded tablecloths. We were linen handlers till we got a sword in our hand, and then we fucking held the breach. And it's like, it made me proud of myself for the first time in forever, thinking, okay, well, I can be a different person. I can do what I'm supposed to do. I might be in a shitty spot right now, but you know what? Something cared enough to let me see that there's another way. And this thought never entered my mind before now. So if I'm going to be in this concrete shithole, like I can walk out of here a man instead of the animal that crawled in here. Like I can
Shawshank Redemption. Shawshank Redemption. Get busy living or get busy dying.
Yeah, man.
I think my teeth, by the way, my orthodontist gave me zigzag braces and pulled my canines into my mouth and then shaved them down. So he said they were the sharpest teeth he's ever seen on a human being.
Like,
wow.
You shouldn't have let him shave it down.
I know. I wish I still had
What the fuck?
I know. I got made fun of them. I was going to keep them until I was a sophomore at Riverdale. And then a girl that I like started making fun of me. She's like, what's wrong with your teeth?
She was just flirting with you,
She's
bro.
like, your teeth are
what
like really sharp.
That's an
like,
in, dude.
You should shave those. And I was like,
that's called peacocking, dude.
Her dad was an orthodontist. Her dad was an orthodontist. That's what that was.
So I think we may pretty much be at the end of the rope here. I want to thank everybody for coming on. This was an incredible conversation. It got very tumultuous at times, but that's very important too. You know, like we need to bring all of these very controversial things up and just let people know where we all stand so we can figure it all out from here. And I'm going to be optimistic. I don't know what's going to happen ultimately to this country or to other countries, but whatever we're creating right now, I think it is possible to do a lot in a very short amount of time just with all the amount of information that's going out right now. Things could be organized in such a way that there could be a Phoenix-like effect at the least. But I just want to thank everybody for coming on. Graventus, thank you so much. Tim, Jules, Info Warlock.
Thank you.
You guys are amazing, and for the people who are watching this right now, please subscribe. We're going to keep growing. We are going to have another stream, by the way, on Wednesday at 10 a.m. It's going to be our first early morning stream, and we are going to have on, I'll tell you right now, we are going to have on, one second, Meta Nomad. So Meta Nomad is going to be coming on, and he's going to be talking about the education system, the lobotomy that we've experienced in the current life we're in. So it's similar subjects to what we're talking about right now. Tim, I don't know what you're doing at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, but if you want to come by, it would be great to have you. Same thing with you, Gravantis, Jules, Info Warlock. It would be great to have you guys back.
Cool.
I mean, I might have to do it from the woods, but I can do it on my phone.
Hell yeah, I'm going to do it from the backyard, which is in the woods, but it's close enough. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please subscribe, donate to our Patreon, patreon.com/11joules. We're going to hit the bell. That's right. I forgot to say hit the bell. Hit the bell, add a like. Thank you guys so much. You guys are the best. Have a good night.
Namaste.
Adios. Sastre Akal.